course, this is the rock and the hard place, right? Because you couldn't be anti-Israel and run an organization like Turning Points, but also you couldn't be pro-Israel and run an organization like Turning Points anymore, because you need the kids and you need the donors.
So when people say he was going to be this rebel, he had this epiphany, he just had to get it out, I don't think that's it. I think, like you said, he was put in an impossible situation because the underlying reality had changed.
Dave Smith and Nick Fuentes just revealed the truth about Charlie Kirk's views on Israel, his final moments, what happened, and how that plays into the FBI investigation into his murder, and who's culpable for it. This was an interesting conversation between two dissidents that don't always agree and sometimes do agree, but let's check them out. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Let's talk about Charlie Kirk
a
little bit. Because there was, me and you both, as I mentioned, have gotten a bunch of heat for not like immediately jumping to these conspiracy theories. Although, like, as I've said the whole time, I'm like, I'm open to it. Like, show me what you got. I do, though, think, and I've talked about this a bit on my show, I know you have on yours as well, I do think that the story of Charlie Kirk, though, and his relationship with Israel is really interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, so aside from the conspiracy stuff, and I guess that my friend Candace, who your dear friend too,
I'm a big fan, yeah.
She just last night released evidently some screenshots of a group chat where Charlie had said, you know, he was very frustrated with a Jewish donor who I guess had pulled some money from him. And he had said something about like, I'm going to not be able to be a Israel supporter anymore. Certainly doesn't tell you anything pointing to his murder. But it does certainly show you that, like, if that's true, and I'm assuming Candace, like, isn't posting a screenshot that's made up. I think Candace has more integrity than that. So if that's true, man, Josh Hammer and these guys have been being really dishonest about what really happened with Charlie Kirk. And I will tell you this story. I don't know if you've heard this before.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh Hammer has to lie about it to plug his book in the first interview opportunities he had after Charlie Kirk's death to say, hey, the final thing that Charlie Kirk said was how great my book was, how he was going to plug it on this campus tour. And if anything, I think Dave's kind of underselling the significance of this because this was 48 hours before his death. Not only did he say, I have no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. Verbatim, that's what he said. You know, something that they swore was wrong, that Candace and Tucker had been mischaracterizing his true feelings on Israel and essentially arguing that he died this pro-Israel martyr. Not the truth. And Josh Hammer has lied about that continually, as we have seen from his Twitter feed and various interviews. But also, he didn't respond to the donor pullout. I think that was presumably Robert Shillman's pullout of $2 million. You know, he didn't respond to that by saying, hey, let's try to balance this out with more Hasbara voices, or let's have a debate, or let me try to ease the tensions to try to rope him back in as a donor. No, he said, I'm going to invite Candace Owens to the next speaking event. That's when you want to burn bridges with this Zionist donor crowd that won't accept Candace Owens and don't want to accept Tucker Carlson. You don't say that if you haven't turned. So I think that is very significant. Totally agree with Dave that this is a major story regardless of what you think about Israel's culpability in Charlie's death. This shows the pressures of the most zealot and rigid and ardent Zionist donor class on organizations like Turning Point, which is probably a drop in the bucket compared to the pressures on the U.S. government.
I apologize to the fans because I have told them this before. But so my only experience where I debated Josh Hammer twice, I think I was telling you this outside and then we got distracted. But so the second time I debated him is at this Charlie Kirk event. And the whole time Charlie Kirk was just like, look, I really want to keep this civil and not be a mudslinging thing. And I go, absolutely, no problem. I think I'm very much like you. In that sense, I think we're very similar, that we're both kind of guys who actually really do care about the ideas and the issues. And yes, if you approach us with like, let's debate these, it will 100% of the time be a substantive conversation. However, if you want to be vicious, like we're also okay with playing that game. Yep. Like, and you're like, I will be more vicious than you. I mean, maybe not you, but just about everybody else. You're not going to, you know, and like, maybe I should be a little more mature than that at this age, but that is how I am. So I went, sure, no problem. So we go in the back, we're in like the green rooms, me and Charlie and his, I'm blanking on his name, but his guy, who's the guy on his show now, who's kind of like his right-hand man.
Andrew Colvin?
Yes, I believe that was him. So it was the three of us, and we talked for a while, and then Josh Hammer came in. And we're just talking, everybody's just being friendly and talking. We were kind of talking about every issue except Israel, because like we're about to go debate that. So we were talking about immigration and started talking about family stuff at one point, just like everyone having a nice conversation. And Charlie, and there's like, okay, we're going to go have this debate. And I was not sure what I was walking into there. Like it was very, very interesting because like half the crowd might have been like your people. I mean, it was at a Charlie Kirk event. It was striking that it was like, or I should say my people. But I came out, the first thing Charlie says when I come out onto stage, so he introduces me. He goes, "Oh, we got a lot of Dave Smith fans here." Like he was kind of surprised that like half the crowd was thrilled to see me there.
I mean, that shows you the dynamic of where the youth conservatives are going. Knowing that Dave Smith is an ardent critic of Israel and still being very supportive of Dave, this is completely different from the trends you see among older conservatives that do not have this kind of viewpoint. And really, the sea change had to have been palpable. It was for us watching and seeing the audience reaction to Dave Smith, which was more powerful than the audience reaction to Josh Hammer.
And then like 20% of them hated my fucking guts, but it was 20% to half. Like wow. It was clearly the majority was because it's young people, man, and that's where they are right now. But so Josh Hammer goes out there after this, and he has the first opening. And the final thing he says in his opening is that he's disgusted to be sharing a stage with me. And I just thought there was something about that I was like, what a fucking snake you are. Mm-hmm. If it was the last communication I ever had with Charlie Kirk was me texting him, what a fucking snake that guy was after all that. And then Charlie just said something diplomatic back. He was like, it was aggressive or something like that. Yeah. But I just thought on like a dude level, and I guess maybe this is part of the reason why me and you always kind of had like a mutual respect and liked each other. There's just something where you're like, who does that?
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck does that? Like, you're so comfortable being duplicitous that you'd sit down. Like, if I was about to go on a show with you right now and do this and be like, I'm disgusted that you're across the table, I wouldn't have had that 20 minutes of nice chit chat with you outside. It would have been like, no, we're doing it like that. So anyway, I say all of that to just say, I don't trust that guy one little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. No one can trust that guy, and he's even more duplicitous than that. Again, plugging his book about this, on the coattails of his supposed friend's murder. I don't think he was a friend to Charlie Kirk, by the way. To lie about his legacy, try to, spin Charlie into this pro-Israel martyr, despite knowing and being on that text chain, knowing that Charlie had said, I have no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause, lying about it for his own benefit to favor the choice division within the conservative movement that he favors. That is duplicitous. That is snake-like. There's no doubt. And by the way, not only TPUSA, but also none of the three other people that Candace has named so far that was part of that text conversation has denied those messages. Those messages are real. There's no way to spin this anymore for the Zionists.
I'm curious, what do you make of the new revelations or this dynamic with Charlie Kirk? It's a weird spot for you to be in, being such a rival and an antagonist of a person, and then they're killed in this horrible way. And so it's a weird spot. But what are your thoughts on this latest?
Well, I agree with how you said it, which is, look, I mean, if someone other than Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk, I'd of course be very interested in that, but I just don't see evidence for that. And people are trying to. It's like anything. In hindsight, you can look at every person's reaction in the crowd and say they're a decoy or an operative, whatever. There's really nothing hard or conclusive that proves anything other than that happened yet. And I'm open to possibilities. What is interesting, but a different conversation, maybe related, is the Israel thing. And I think very clearly, as you and Tucker and Candace and others have said, and Max Blumenthal have said, there's ample evidence that at the minimum, there was something dynamic there. He was a pro-Israel guy for many years. Now, seems like that was in flux, and a lot of the evidence has kind of been knocked out. This Bill Ackman retreat, Bill Ackman produced the texts, and Charlie arranged the whole thing. And it was a forum where I'm sure disagreement was expressed, but it showed generally they were still aligned. More interesting was his interview with Megyn Kelly, where clearly he platformed Tucker and you, and it seemed that supporting Israel was in contention, which they hate that that's even on the table, because it matters how you set the table. It doesn't necessarily even matter what your position is, but they don't want that to be up for debate. Do we support Israel? Not a question they want people to ask.
Yeah, that's correct. The last thing they wanted was Tucker Carlson on the stage at this event and Josh Hammer and Dave Smith debating. They didn't want debate. They wanted Hasbara. Now, I agree with Nick about the fact that I don't see evidence outside of Tyler committing this murder. I don't. I do think there are crazy things in the FBI narrative. I do think George Zinn, the decoy, is interesting. It's not as Nick says that, hey, there's decoys everywhere. This is a guy that told authorities, you know, at first I shot Charlie Kirk, and then when apprehended and taken to the station, he said, you know, I just said that because I wanted to help the real killer escape. This has been widely reported, and this guy was released in 6 hours. Now, I haven't seen anyone make connections there, but I think that is more palpable than, oh, there could be decoys everywhere. That's not an accurate reflection of what happened in my mind. But, you know, the Bill Ackman summit, there was contention there that's been, you know, released by many parties and many corroborating things from these unnamed sources to Max Blumenthal. And at one point, one account has Charlie Kirk holding up his phone saying, if I was to send this tweet out that Benjamin Netanyahu should resign, why does that make me anti-Israel, and them having a big problem with that? That's one account. I'm just saying that this seems to be more contentious than that, but I do agree that there was an interesting power dynamic there regarding his shift at the end.
Especially when you're losing the debate.
Yes.
You know, I mean, that doesn't help either.
Yeah, especially when you get booed and, you know, killed in the debate. They don't like that either. And so even that, they were really pushing back on Charlie, threatening. I guess the new revelation is they took the money. They took the $2 million. It's a pretty big organization, but that's not a negligible chunk of change for Charlie and Turning Point USA. And he goes in the group chat, and assuming, like you said, that it's authentic, you know, that is, I think, the most stark thing we've heard from him on the record, where he says, I have to leave the Israel camp. And I would say that's even different than what he said on Megyn Kelly. Because on Megyn Kelly, he said, oh, you're going to call me an anti-Semite? He sort of stopped himself. He said, well, you're going to lose me. That's what he was going towards.
Yeah, and then
you're not going to lose me. He goes, but I'm going to be deflated. In that text, he says, I'm out.
Yeah, I think that's significant. I mean, I have to say, as someone that believed that, you know, he never really turned against Israel until I saw this. There were moments in those conversations, those podcasts, where he clearly expressed his frustration, but it was counterbalanced, especially in the Megyn Kelly August 6th interview in particular, where he doubled down on Hasbara propaganda, said, you know, there's no genocide in Gaza, we can't trust the pictures coming out of Gaza, etc. Something the Zionists always say, you know, that's all Hamas propaganda, that's Qatari propaganda. They were saying that sort of thing, and if you don't believe me, listen to that. But this was a major moment, I think. This was a much bigger moment that really shows that he was going to leave this thing, and it was just 48 hours before his death. I mean, you couldn't write this script. It's too interesting. It's too compelling of a story, regardless, again, of the circumstances revolved around his assassination.
And I would characterize that as I was his rival, and I'm very cynical about him. He was kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. He was really in the middle because, like you said, it's young people. They are Israel critical. And he had to go and defend the bullshit to them at the campus, in the arena, in the pit. You know, so it's easy for them in the ivory tower to say, yeah, we love Israel still. He's actually having to get the shit. And 100 Groypers on the line saying, why do you still love Israel? And I think that he recognized it became a liability.
Yeah, totally true. This was the exact dynamic. I totally agree with Nick on this. He was in a rock and a hard place where he had to counterbalance the interests that were conflicting at times between this rich Zionist donor class and the young college activists that he needed to call upon to get signatures and push candidates and get people elected, something that the donors don't want to spend their time doing, but they do want to give money for. And those interests being at odds put Charlie in the middle of it. And some of his opinions on this had to have been a reflection upon that. But again, 48 hours in advance, it seems like he picked a side, and it wasn't the side of Bill Ackman and Seth Dillon.
And started to try and accommodate everybody, Tucker and the other side, Candace and the other side, the Groypers, so to speak, or the Dave Smith people and the other side. And the other side wasn't having it. They said, you better get the fucking line or we're pulling the plug. And I think he defiantly said, I will not be bullied. I thought it would have been interesting to see where that would have went, but sadly we'll never know.
Absolutely. I mean, that shows some integrity because this was a lot of money flying around, man. And to have integrity for that, whatever you could say about Charlie Kirk, and I didn't always agree with Charlie Kirk. I hated when he defended Israel despite all the absurdity that the U.S. gets pulled into because of the U.S.-Israeli relationship and how much sovereignty that Israel robs from our government. But at the same time, I think that shows character integrity. It would have been interesting to see where this went because this is where conservatism is going anyways, especially with young people.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I've always, I kind of took, I took what he was saying in that thread like a little differently than I guess some people did. Like I always thought the dynamic with Charlie Kirk was kind of that it was like, look, he's the guy who has to keep the young people on board. And he's by definition, he has to be a big tent guy.
Yes.
Because he's trying to win, he's in a different game than me and you are in.
Yes.
Like it's a whole different thing to be like we're in the business of telling the truth as we see it. We're in the business of breaking down the ideas and how we view them. And as you said, at times, even like stretching the Overton window and maybe even accepting that, like, I'm going to be speaking to the remnant here. I'm going to be speaking to one group of people, but hopefully this group will move the broader conversation. A very different thing to be doing a get out the vote campaign. You need everybody involved. And I think that I think Josh Hammer is not lying when he says he was doing everything to keep you out. Like that was the goal, is like, we are going to cut the line here. But just with the new dynamics of where politics is now in this real, like a revolution in media that me and you have both been living through and being, active participants in, it was like, okay, but you're big enough at this point that like, okay, cutting Nick Fuentes out and then everything else is a big tent. Okay, you maybe could pull that off. Mm-hmm. But you're asking Tucker and Megyn Kelly too? Right. And I think Charlie just realized the tent now is like, there's no way this works.
That's exactly right. You can't cut out the biggest influencers on the right. He just named, Tucker. I think he said Candace and Megyn Kelly. Cutting them out of this movement, it's too much. It's too absurd. You can't ask for the biggest people to be cut out of this movement to facilitate this dying Zionist cause, and that's where he was at. And what does it say where Dave is so right talking about how him and Nick are in the business of telling the truth as they see it, right? That's them. They're dissidents. They're content creators. I'm kind of that too. But you can't have that in American politics. And what does that say about our political system, by the way? That the unmitigated truth is unacceptable. It's, pushed aside by, gatekeepers and the filtration system that only allows what my friend Tom Woods calls the index card of allowable opinion. This small index card which is written the limits to which you can go before you're considered an extremist. That is what this dynamic is.
And so I almost took it when he was saying, I have to do this, as going, I'm going to have no other choice to keep turning. And of course, this is the rock and the hard place, right? Because you couldn't be anti-Israel and run an organization like Turning Points, but also you couldn't be pro-Israel and run an organization like Turning Points anymore, because you need the kids and you need the donors. And so there's this, and I think that, it did seem that essentially like his calculation, it seems to me, I'm speculating a little bit, but that his calculation was like, okay, well, I'll have Tucker and I'll let Dave do this debate. And then I can be seen as like, hey, look, I'm facilitating the conversation. I'll do all this. But that was way too far for the bag. They were like, yo, what are you kidding me? Like, I mean,
yeah, this is exactly right. He thought he could walk the tightrope there. But again, they don't want Tucker Carlson and they don't want debate. They want more Hasbara. This is the Zionist donor class that doesn't want to see the table set in a way where competing ideas are put forth. No, they want propaganda. They don't want competing ideas. This is very apparent, and it's a dynamic that doesn't just exist in Turning Point USA. It also exists in our political system, in the bureaucracy, in Congress, in the presidency. Miriam Adelson's man is Donald Trump, right? He stacked his cabinet full of these people that, toe the Zionist line, and that's what we get. And this dynamic, this is why this is so important of a story. Regardless, these pressures are unavoidable. The hypocrisy of the Israel First mentality is too glaring when such a cornerstone of the Trump platform is America First. Like, we see right through that.
These are the people who, like, they thought when Mom Donnie say a million things about the guy, he's probably going to be very bad for this city that we're currently in right now, and also is just like very cringy and awful in a lot of ways. But the fact that he said, why this is coming up in a New York City mayoral debate, do you favor a one-state solution or a two-state solution? What the hell does this have to do with New York City? But he goes, I favor one state with equal rights for all, and they went, Adolf Hitler. You fucking nuts. Like, that was supposed to be the gotcha. Like, in what world is the bad guy the guy who's going, I think everyone should have equal rights? It's just.
That's exactly right, to think that that was a political weapon to be wielded against this guy, and I've got all sorts of disagreements with Mondani, but to say that, man, it just shows how tone-deaf the legacy establishment is, and it shows how much the Israel issue creeps into local politics, where this is a New York City mayoral election. It's like, yeah, I guess the UN is in New York City, but I don't think that New York City, as a locality, bears that as its kind of first priority by any stretch, but this is seeping into our domestic policy, and you can see how it infects, the attacks against free speech, censorship on the part of Zionism, trying to keep out anti-Zionist mentality, smear it as anti-Semitism, etc. Several states are doing that. I think both Georgia and Arizona have done that, maybe more states, and rewriting civil codes to disaccommodate those that are critical of Israel. We even see the federal government creating regulations and restrictions to stop emergency disaster aid to go to people or organizations that are critical of Israel. That story broke a few weeks ago. So we're seeing this all over the place.
But so to them, there is no distinction between any of us. You know what I mean? Like, it's all kind of the same thing. And yeah, I don't know. It is very interesting because there's something. There's something revealing about the fact that even, say, people like Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk will get the same type of treatment when they step out of line.
Right.
Yeah, strayed way too far from the reservation. They're complaining that Megyn Kelly is, turned on them because she hosted Marjorie Taylor Greene on her show. That is enough to get you on the bad guy list, right, to the Zionists. And then also she said no one under 30 supports Israel. That's an exaggeration, but not that far of an exaggeration. So they think she's wandered too far off the reservation. They're coming for her, despite the fact she's a self-described Zionist. She literally has said that. I've seen her say that many times, and defends Israel, backs the Hasbara propaganda when it comes to Gaza to a T, but she is not good enough for them. You're seeing the Zionists eat themselves. I think it's kind of a beautiful thing, I hate to say, but it shows where the tides are going, where the writing is on the wall. People are seeing through it, and this won't be the last of them. There will be more defections from that Zionist side as we see the rejection wholesale of the Israel first mentality, even on the right. And it's one of the best tendencies and trajectories I see in politics right now.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And people are, I think, misreading it a little bit, like he was this. It's such an important point you made that we do something different, because when we go on our shows, we say, I think, I feel. He didn't really have that luxury.
Right.
Because he was not in the business actually of telling it like he sees it. He was in the business of, it was more political, getting everybody to vote, keeping everybody happy, pushing directionally towards the right. And so when people say he was going to be this rebel, he had this epiphany, he just had to get it out, I don't think that's it. I think, like you said, he was put in an impossible situation because the underlying reality had changed. The underlying political dynamic, the right-wing youth are what they are, and the donors are what they are. And as a matter of fact, I don't think he left Israel. I think Israel left him. And that's sort of what the text said. He said, they leave me with no choice.
Yeah.
After they pulled the money, they said, we cannot tolerate, so we're taking the money. And he said, well, I'm not going to be held hostage by your money. I have to side with the ever-growing tent of people that are either indifferent or critical or anti or whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't call this epiphany. It was significant, but this seemed to be part of a gradual shift on Charlie's part against the Israel first mentality to some degree. This did represent something new, that he had no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause. That's something he never said publicly, right? Not in that Megyn Kelly interview where he does, say his character is being called into question and it's wrong and it's immoral. and, you know, having a problem with not being able to even levy minor critiques against Israel. But this was major. It wasn't an epiphany. I agree with Nick on that. But it was indicative of a shift. It was a reflection of what he was going through. And when he was going through it, he didn't say, hey, let's try to, you know, curtail the tensions here. Let's invite Candace Owens to my event. That will not do that. So, yeah, this was interesting.
And so that is how I read it. And I agree. I mean, to the broader point, even the earlier conversation, Israel is in a lot of trouble, it seems. I was sort of skeptical, but this is very much in flux because it is the right-wing youth. It's Tucker, it's Megyn Kelly, it's Charlie Kirk, it's France, it's Portugal, it's UK, it's Canada, it's like most of America. And, you know, I guess the question is what's on the other side of it. If they win, well, they will have unprecedented power. With Iran out of the picture, they'll be an enormously powerful, maybe the regional power in the Middle East. If they lose, or if they don't get everything they want, then they might be in more peril than ever before. And I guess the remaining thing is kind of where it goes from here with Trump, you know, because it's so weird how everything, in a sense, I don't believe that they killed Charlie Kirk, and yet his death, by revealing what it did, is going to play a big role in this conversation. Because like you said, it shows that the right wing is literally breaking up over this. Like this issue is forcing this contradiction, and that contradiction is splitting the right, which is the ruling party. In the middle of the UN meeting, in the middle of the peace deal that's about to blow up, it's like, I think when all is said and done, we look at this 2-year period, it will contribute to that larger conversation. And then, you know, where's Trump going to go with it?
Yeah, I totally agree with Nick on this. That's why this is worth paying attention to, even if you think this is just like scandal mongering, gossip mongering. It doesn't have much bearing. I really do think it does. This is a microcosm of where the right is fracturing right now on the Israel issue and all the ancillary issues that are connected to that primary issue. Because even, you know, the Iran war obviously was connected to that issue. The Epstein issue, largely probably connected to it with Epstein's connections to Israeli officials and Israeli intelligence officials, including Ehud Barak. You know, things like that are so connected and intertwined to this, as, you know, the ruling powers tell us that anti-Semitism is the biggest health crisis in the country right now. RFK Jr. has tweeted that several times. I mean, this is fracturing the right. It's something that Trump doesn't want to see, but at the same time, Trump and the administration are too beholden by the Israel lobby. So is Congress, and it's a bipartisan thing. It's not just confined to MAGA or America First. It's a part of the liberal establishment, too. There are dissidents on both sides of that equation in some ways, you know, galvanizing support against this. Even on the right, you see the most courageous person on this, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie, you know, having big issues on this. But people on the left, like Ilhan Omar and Ro Khanna, are pretty good on this too. And they have been for a long time, longer than many of the voices on the right. I'll give them that, despite me not agreeing with them as much, right? But that's what we're seeing. We're seeing this dynamic play out in front of our eyes, this fracture on the right. And this story, the pressure campaign against Charlie, it really exposes the Zionist agenda for what it really is. And this, again, is just a drop in the bucket compared to the pressure campaign on American political officials in power in our government as they actually unfurl policy. So if you can see it in an organization like Turning Point, it can't be ignored when it happens in the United States government, the bureaucracy, Congress, and the executive office. And that's what I think about this. I think this is a really interesting conversation. Largely agreed with all of them on this. As you could tell, I had minor reservations with how some things were put, but mostly agree with them both on this. This is a story, regardless of what you think about Israel's responsibility in Kirk's murder. I don't buy into that, but it's not like, you know, I've shut the door on that conversation. I haven't. I'm open to talking about it, hearing what evidence people have. Right now, it's just circumstantial things, and there doesn't seem to be anything linking Israel to either Tyler, or if you don't think the shooter was Tyler, a different shooter. Haven't really seen any hard evidence for that, whereas, say, like with Martin Luther King, we know that the FBI tried to have King commit suicide. They had wiretapped King. King correctly suspected that was true through COINTELPRO. We know that, you know, the CIA had a connection to Oswald, and yeah, it took years for those stories to emerge and for that to become more concrete. But at the same time, I think we need that to be more definitive in our judgment that Israel was involved. So that's what I'll say about that. You guys have heard my piece on that. What did you think about this? Was this an interesting conversation? Do you agree with Dave and Nick about what this story means and its importance? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Dave Smith. Thank you, Dave. Awesome interview. If you like this video and my commentary, it would mean the world to me if you sign up as a member. If you click the join button below, you can do that, supporting the channel, and in return, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.